The rain poured relentlessly over the historic streets of Charleston, South Carolina, a city known for its charm and southern hospitality. But for Jonathan Blake, a prominent tech entrepreneur, the night was anything but welcoming. His sleek black Tesla pulled into the circular driveway of the Magnolia Inn, an upscale hotel nestled in the heart of the city. The golden glow of its grand facade reflected on the wet cobblestones, promising luxury and comfort, or so he thought. Jonathan stepped out, adjusting the collar of his tailored grey trench coat. At 6'3", with an air of quiet confidence, he naturally drew attention wherever he went. He strode into the lobby, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. The scent of lavender and freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air as he approached the front desk. "Good evening," he greeted, offering a polite smile to the young man behind the counter. The clerk, a wiry figure in his 20s with sharp features and an air of disinterest, barely looked up from his computer screen. His name tag read Brad. "I'd like a room for the night," Jonathan continued, his tone cordial. "My flight was delayed, and I'll need a place to stay before heading to New York in the morning." Brad's fingers hovered over the keyboard, but his expression remained blank. "Sorry, sir, we're fully booked," he replied curtly, his voice devoid of any warmth. Jonathan raised an eyebrow, glancing around the spacious lobby. It wasn't crowded, far from it. A single couple stood by the elevator, and the hushed ambience suggested anything but a full house. "Fully booked, you say?" Jonathan asked, his voice steady, though a flicker of skepticism crossed his face. "Yes," Brad said flatly, not meeting Jonathan's gaze. Before Jonathan could respond, the revolving doors spun open, and a middle-aged couple entered, dragging a pair of designer suitcases behind them. Brad's demeanor shifted instantly, his face lit up with a broad smile, and his tone turned syrupy. "Welcome to the Magnolia Inn. Do you have a reservation?" The man shook his head. "No, we were hoping you'd have a room available." "Not a problem," Brad said cheerfully. His fingers danced across the keyboard, and within moments, he produced a key card. "Enjoy your stay." Jonathan watched the exchange, his calm mask slipping just slightly. The hypocrisy was blatant, but he said nothing. Instead, he nodded politely, turned on his heel, and stepped back out into the rain. What Brad didn't know was that Jonathan Blake wasn't just another stranded traveler. He was a billionaire and one of the sharpest minds in the tech world. And as he stood under the awning, rain dripping off his coat, Jonathan made a decision. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Jonathan leaned against the cold steel pillar under the awning, the rain forming a steady rhythm above. He wasn't the type to act impulsively. Years of navigating high-stakes boardrooms had taught him patience. But tonight, standing in the rain with his pride slightly bruised, he felt a quiet resolve solidify within him. He watched as the revolving doors of the Magnolia Inn spun again. This time, a young man in a hoodie and faded jeans ambled inside. His backpack was slung low over one shoulder, and his sneakers squeaked slightly as he crossed the marble floor. Jonathan couldn't hear the exchange, but it didn't take much to read the body language. Brad was all smiles and nods, his attitude worlds apart from how he had treated Jonathan. Within minutes, the young man walked away with a room key, a satisfied look on his face. Jonathan straightened, a slow exhale escaping him. It wasn't about availability, it was about something far uglier, a prejudice that Brad likely thought was subtle. But to Jonathan, it was unmistakable. Instead of anger, Jonathan felt a sharper emotion, determination. Pulling his phone from his pocket, he scrolled through his contacts until he found the number of an old friend, Jessica Miles. his trusted real estate lawyer. Jessica was known for her tenacity, the kind of person who could close deals others wouldn't even attempt. "Jessica, it's Jonathan," he began when she picked up. "I need you to get me everything you can on the Magnolia Inn. Ownership, financials, current market valuation. I want it all." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Jessica replied, her voice cautious. "That's a bit out of your usual lane, isn't it? You're more about algorithms and startups, not hotels." Jonathan allowed himself a small smile. "Let's just say tonight was educational. Can you do it?" "Consider it done," Jessica replied, her tone firm. "I'll have preliminary details for you by morning." "Perfect," Jonathan said. "And one more thing. If the hotel is part of a larger chain, I want to know about that too." After hanging up, Jonathan climbed back into his Tesla, shaking the water from his coat before settling into the leather seat. He wasn't just thinking about himself anymore. How many others had walked into that hotel only to face the same quiet rejection? How many had walked away feeling powerless to do anything about it? The rain pounded harder as he drove toward his townhouse on the edge of the city. His mind raced with possibilities. He had built an empire by outsmarting those who underestimated him. And this time would be no different. By the time he arrived home, the outlines of his plan had begun to take shape. He wasn't going to simply buy the hotel. He was going to transform it, rebuild it into a beacon of fairness and hospitality. It wouldn't just be about proving a point. It would be about creating something better. As he climbed the stairs to his study, Jonathan thought about his father, a man who had always told him, "Never let anyone else define your worth. If they underestimate you, use it to your advantage." Those words had guided Jonathan through every challenge in his life. And tonight, they resonated more than ever. He spent the next few hours combing through news articles and property records, his laptop casting a soft glow in the dimly lit room. True to her word, Jessica emailed him just before sunrise. Attached was a detailed breakdown of the Magnolia Inn. It was part of a struggling boutique hotel chain, rumored to be considering a sale due to mounting debts. Jonathan's smile returned as he read the report. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was the perfect storm. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, Jonathan had made up his mind. He wasn't just going to buy the Magnolia Inn. He was going to turn it into the gold standard for what hospitality should be, a place where everyone was treated with dignity, no matter who they were. As the sun rose over Charleston, Jonathan sent one final email to Jessica: "Move forward with the purchase. Let's make this official by week's end." The Magnolia Inn had no idea what was coming, but Jonathan wasn't going to wait long to show them. He was done playing by their rules. From now on, he was writing his own. By the end of the week, Jonathan Blake officially owned the Magnolia Inn. The deal had been finalized faster than most would consider possible, thanks to Jessica's skill and Jonathan's unwavering determination. It wasn't just a transaction, it was a statement. The Magnolia Inn, with its pristine facade and tarnished reputation, was now in the hands of someone who believed in accountability and fairness. On the first morning under his ownership, Jonathan arrived at the hotel just as the sun began to rise over Charleston. The building looked the same as it had that rainy night, gleaming windows, a neatly trimmed garden, and an air of exclusivity. But to Jonathan, it already felt different. He wasn't stepping into it as a guest seeking refuge. He was entering as the man who now controlled its future. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, he pushed open the heavy glass doors and strode into the lobby. The staff were beginning their shifts. their chatter dying down as they noticed him. There was an undeniable ripple of curiosity and unease. Most of them had no idea who he was, yet. Jonathan walked straight to the front desk. Brad was there, just as polished and smug as before. He didn't recognize Jonathan immediately, but when Jonathan set a black folder on the counter, Brad's smile faltered. Jonathan opened the folder, revealing a stack of signed documents. "My name is Jonathan Blake," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "As of 8 a.m. this morning, I am the new owner of the Magnolia Inn." The lobby fell silent. Brad's confident facade crumbled as Jonathan's words sank in. "Wait, what?" Brad stammered, his face pale. Jonathan fixed him with a steady gaze. "I've already reviewed reports on how this hotel operates, and I've experienced some of it firsthand. Let's just say I'm not impressed." Brad opened his mouth to respond, but Jonathan raised a hand, silencing him. "There's no need to explain. Actions speak louder than words. And yours were loud and clear." He let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "Effective immediately. You are dismissed." The color drained from Brad's face. You can't just fire me." Jonathan's tone remained steady. "I can, and I have. Your actions don't align with the values this hotel will uphold moving forward." Brad sputtered a weak protest, but it was no use. The staff looked on in stunned silence as Brad gathered his things and left the lobby. Slamming the door behind him, Jonathan let out a quiet breath. The most visible symbol of the hotel's flaws was gone, but the real work was just beginning. Turning to the rest of the staff, Jonathan addressed them with the same calm authority. "I'm not here to punish anyone unfairly. Mistakes happen, and growth is possible if you're willing to embrace change. But let me be clear, this hotel will no longer tolerate discrimination or prejudice in any form." The staff exchanged uneasy glances, but Jonathan continued, his voice firm but not unkind. "From this moment forward, the Magnolia Inn will represent fairness, respect, and inclusion. That means new policies, new training, and a fresh start for all of us." One of the younger staff members, a woman named Sarah who worked at the concierge desk, raised her hand hesitantly. "What kind of changes are you talking about?" she asked. Jonathan offered a reassuring smile. "We're going to rebuild this hotel from the inside out, not just the physical space, but the culture. You'll all have the opportunity to grow and thrive here, but only if you're willing to put in the work." He spent the rest of the morning outlining his vision. New training programs would focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. An independent consultant would be brought in to ensure every staff member understood and embraced the new policies. And the hotel itself would undergo a transformation to reflect its new identity. Jonathan stayed well into the afternoon, personally meeting with each department to hear their concerns and ideas. He made a point to connect with Sarah, whose warmth and genuine enthusiasm stood out among the staff. By the end of the day, he knew she had the potential to be a leader, and he planned to help her rise through the ranks. That evening, as Jonathan left the hotel, he felt the weight of the day lift slightly. There was still much to do, but the foundation had been laid. The Magnolia Inn was no longer just a building. It was becoming a symbol of what hospitality could, and should, be. Jonathan glanced back at the grand facade as the setting sun cast a golden glow over it. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but that was what made it worth it. Change was never simple, but it was always necessary. The transformation of the Magnolia Inn began in earnest the very next day. True to his word, Jonathan wasted no time in setting the wheels of change in motion. Construction crews arrived to assess the property, Consultants from a renowned hospitality training firm scheduled their first workshops, and the air inside the hotel felt charged with a mix of apprehension and hope. Jonathan returned early, dressed more casually this time in a blazer and jeans. Signaling his approachability, he walked the lobby with Sarah, now officially promoted to assistant manager. Her excitement was evident, though tinged with nervousness. "I've never been in a leadership role before," she admitted, clutching a clipboard tightly. "You'll do great," Jonathan reassured her. "You have what it takes: empathy, drive, and a genuine desire to make this place better. Those are the qualities that matter most." Sarah smiled, visibly relaxing. Together, they met with the training team to prepare for the first workshop. The goal was clear: teach the staff not just the mechanics of hospitality, but the importance of treating every guest with dignity and respect, regardless of who they were. The workshop kicked off that afternoon in the hotel's main conference room. Jonathan sat at the back, observing as the trainers guided the staff through conversations about implicit bias, inclusivity, and equity. At first, there was resistance. Some staff members folded their arms, their skepticism written all over their faces. But as the sessions progressed, stories emerged. One housekeeper spoke about how she often felt invisible to guests, treated as if she were part of the furniture rather than a human being. Another staff member, a bellhop, recounted an incident where a wealthy guest had belittled him for his accent. The room grew quiet as these experiences were shared, the tension slowly melting into understanding. Even Sarah found her voice during the session. "We have a chance to do something incredible here," she said, her voice steady but impassioned. "To create a place where everyone, guests and staff alike, feel like they belong." Jonathan couldn't have been prouder. This was exactly what he envisioned, not just a policy change, but a cultural shift. While the staff worked on redefining their approach to hospitality, the physical renovation of the hotel began. Jonathan wanted the Magnolia Inn to feel as inclusive and welcoming as its mission. He oversaw every detail, from the warm, earthy tones of the new paint to the inviting layout of the lobby. The old marble counters at the front desk were replaced with a lower, curved design to make interactions feel more personable. Fresh flowers adorned every corner, their vibrant colors adding life to the space. Guests started to take notice. Longtime patrons were curious about the changes, while new visitors were drawn by the buzz surrounding the hotel's transformation. The staff, now armed with their training and renewed purpose, welcomed everyone with genuine warmth. Jonathan made a point of being present in the day-to-day operations. He spent time in the kitchen chatting with the chefs, walked through housekeeping to check on their needs, and greeted guests in the lobby. His leadership style was hands-on, and it didn't go unnoticed. Not everything went smoothly, of course. There were moments of tension, especially with staff members who resisted the changes. One senior concierge, an older man named Greg, openly questioned the necessity of the new policies. "I've been in this business for 30 years," he told Jonathan one afternoon. "I know how to treat guests. I don't need someone telling me how to do my job." Jonathan listened patiently, then responded, "I respect your experience, Greg, but this isn't just about you or me. It's about creating a better environment for everyone. Change is hard, but it's necessary." Greg didn't respond immediately, but over time, even he softened. He attended every training session, albeit reluctantly at first, and began to see the impact of the changes through the smiles of satisfied guests and the camaraderie among his colleagues. By the end of the month, the Magnolia Inn had begun to look and feel like a completely different place. The reviews reflected it, too. Guests praised not just the luxurious accommodations, but the welcoming atmosphere and exceptional service. One review in particular caught Jonathan's eye. It came from a single mother who had stayed at the hotel with her 2 young children. She wrote, "I've stayed at many hotels, but this one felt special. The staff treated us like family. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen and valued. Thank you for creating a space like this." Reading those words, Jonathan felt a surge of pride. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about the impact they were making. The transformation wasn't just limited to the hotel. Jonathan noticed a shift within himself, too. He had built his career in the tech industry, focused on data and efficiency. But this venture was different. It was personal. For the first time in years, he felt deeply connected to his work, not just as a business owner but as a human being. As the days turned into weeks, the Magnolia Inn began to attract attention beyond Charleston. Local news outlets ran stories about the hotel's transformation, highlighting its commitment to inclusivity and excellence. Jonathan received calls from other hoteliers, asking for advice on how to implement similar changes in their own businesses. Standing in the newly renovated lobby one evening, Jonathan watched as Sarah guided a family to their room. The parents were laughing, the children wide-eyed with excitement. He smiled, knowing they were experiencing the heart of what the Magnolia Inn now represented, hospitality that truly cared. 6 months after Jonathan Blake had taken ownership of the Magnolia Inn, it was nearly unrecognizable, not just in its appearance, but in its soul. The once cold, exclusive atmosphere had been replaced by a warm and vibrant energy that drew guests from all walks of life. The hotel wasn't just a place to stay anymore. It was a symbol of change, a beacon of what hospitality could achieve when rooted in respect and fairness. Jonathan stood in the center of the bustling lobby one crisp autumn morning, sipping his coffee and taking it all in. The sunlight poured through the grand windows, illuminating the newly installed centerpiece, a sculpture of intertwined hands, representing unity and diversity. Guests mingled, staff moved efficiently with smiles on their faces, and laughter echoed softly through the space. Sarah approached him with a clipboard in hand. "Morning, Mr. Blake," she said cheerfully, now entirely confident in her role as assistant manager. "The final guest satisfaction survey results are in. 98% of our guests said they'd recommend us to others." Jonathan chuckled, setting down his cup. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" "We really have," Sarah replied, glancing around the lobby. "But it's all thanks to your vision." He shook his head. "No, it's thanks to all of us. Change isn't about one person, it's about a team, a community." The hotel had become a success story in the local media, with several news outlets running features on its transformation. Journalists focused on Jonathan's hands-on approach, the innovative training programs, and the stories of staff who had grown through the process. Sarah, in particular, became a star of the narrative, a young woman who had risen from a concierge role to a leadership position, embodying the hotel's new values. But Jonathan knew the transformation wasn't just about the staff or the guests. It was also about confronting the past and creating a better future. This hit home one day when an unexpected visitor walked through the front doors. It was Brad. Jonathan spotted him immediately, his once arrogant posture replaced by something far more subdued. He approached Jonathan cautiously, his hands stuffed into his pockets. "Mr. Blake," Brad began, his voice hesitant. I wanted to say I'm sorry." Jonathan raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. "I didn't realize how much damage my attitude could cause," Brad continued, his gaze fixed on the floor. "After you let me go, I had to take a hard look at myself. I've been working at a small motel. And, well, let's just say I've learned a lot about what it feels like to be overlooked. There was a long silence before Jonathan spoke. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, he said, but the question is, what are you going to do about it? Brad looked up, surprised. I want to do better, he said earnestly. If there's any chance I could come back, even in a small role, I'd be grateful. Jonathan studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Everyone deserves a second chance. But understand this, if you come back, it won't be easy. You'll need to prove you're committed to the values this hotel stands for. I understand, Brad said, relief washing over his face. Thank you. In the months that followed, Brad worked harder than anyone else, determined to rebuild his reputation. Under Sarah's guidance, he became a different person, humble, empathetic, and dedicated. Guests noticed, too, leaving positive comments about his helpfulness and newfound warmth. For Jonathan, Brad's return was a reminder that true change wasn't just about policies or training. It was about giving people the opportunity to grow. It was a lesson he carried with him as he continued to oversee the hotel's evolution. The grand reopening of the Magnolia Inn was a grand affair. Local officials, media, and guests gathered in the beautifully redesigned ballroom to celebrate the hotel's journey. Jonathan stood at the podium, addressing the crowd with a calm confidence. When I first walked into this hotel, he began, I didn't see it for what it could be. I only saw what it was, a place that didn't live up to its potential. But what I've learned over these past months is that change isn't just about fixing things. It's about believing in the people who make those changes possible. He glanced at Sarah, standing near the stage, and then at Brad, who was helping a guest find their seat. Both smiled back, their pride evident. This hotel is no longer just a building. Jonathan continued. It's a symbol, a reminder that when we treat people with respect and dignity, incredible things can happen. The room erupted in applause, and Jonathan stepped back, letting the moment wash over him. He thought about the long road it had taken to get here, the rainy night in Charleston, the quiet rejection, and the determination that had driven him to rewrite the story. As the event wound down, Jonathan stood near the entrance. Watching guests file out, a man approached him, his wife and 2 children trailing behind. The man extended a hand, his smile warm. Mr. Blake, I read about what you've done here. It's inspiring. Thank you for making a place like this. Jonathan shook his hand, his own smile genuine. This place is for everyone, he said simply. That's how it should always be. As the family walked away, Jonathan turned back toward the lobby, taking in the laughter and light that filled the space. For him, the Magnolia Inn wasn't just a business venture anymore. It was a legacy, a testament to what could happen when people chose to stand up for what was right. In the end, it wasn't about the money or the success. It was about creating something that mattered. And for Jonathan Blake, that was the greatest accomplishment of all.